We are delighted to have Secretary Pritzker with us. On September 14th of this year, President Biden announced that he was appointing former U.S. Commerce Secretary Penny Pritzker to serve as the U.S. Special Representative for Ukraine's economic recovery. In her new role as Special Representative, Penny is working closely with the Ukrainian government, the G7, the European Union, other international partners, and critically, the private sector, to help Ukraine forge a prosperous, democratic, and secure future. She's driving efforts to shape donor priorities and ensure they are aligned with Ukraine's needs, while also working closely with the Ukrainians to intensify their reform efforts to stabilize and rebuild their country and realize their Euro-Atlantic aspirations. Thank you, Penny, for being here. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Peter, thank you very much for that kind introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here at the 15th Halifax International Security Forum. Peter, you and I have some things in common. We're both policy entrepreneurs. Your work as the founding president of this forum has helped to advance Canadian leadership on the world stage. And there's another thing that unites us. We know that security is an economic issue, and economic resilience is a national security issue. It's been true for the United States, for Canada, for our NATO allies, as well as it's true for Ukraine today. As a Ukrainian American, I'm delighted to be in a country like Canada, which has such deep ties to Ukraine. Canada has the largest Ukrainian diaspora outside of Europe, with provinces like Alberta and Manitoba, where over 9% of the population claim Ukrainian ancestry. Just think about everyone from the late Jeopardy host Alex Trebek to Canada's Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland. Like for many of them, working to help Ukraine is extremely personal for me as well. Roughly over 140 years ago, my then 10-year-old great-grandfather, Nicholas Pritzker, fled Kyiv to the United States to escape the Jewish persecution at the time. He came to the United States, grew up, became a pharmacist, and then a lawyer, and raised a family. My family found opportunity in the United States in my beloved hometown of Chicago. 7 years ago, when I had the privilege to serve as Commerce Secretary, I led the U.S. delegation to a commemoration of the Baba Yar massacre in Kyiv, a place where more than 33,000 Jewish people were brutally murdered in less than a week by the Nazis 82 years ago. I was struck to see up close the ravine that was a mass graveyard. And it was clear to me, had my family not fled when they did, there's a good chance they would have been murdered there as well. Today, the people of Ukraine are experiencing a whole new horror. Since its February 2022 full-scale invasion, Russia has aimed to erase the sovereign nation of Ukraine. And let there be no doubt that Vladimir Putin is bonded with others, like Hamas, in their use of terror and their hatred of free ideas, free markets, and free people. Throughout the world, both our friends and our adversaries are watching to see how the U.S. and our allies collectively respond to this moment, reminding us that our military and economic support for Ukraine will affect the global order. So let me be clear, economic resilience is a core tenet of Ukraine's war effort. Ukraine's security and economy form a double helix, indelibly intertwined in the country's effort to beat Putin on the battlefield and beat the Putinomics of authoritarianism, corruption, kleptocracy, and state capture by oligarchs. That's why I wanted to speak to the Halifax International Security Forum in my role as the U.S. Special Representative for Ukraine's economic recovery. Today, I want to make 3 points. First, how Ukraine's security defends prosperity, both in Ukraine and in NATO. Second, how Ukraine's prosperity hardens its security. And third, how we can all work together to advance the Ukraine of the future. First, on security. Make no mistake, the strategic momentum is with Ukraine. Ukraine's brave service members have reclaimed over 50% of the territory Russia once captured. And with our collective support, the Ukrainians are degrading the Russian military, in fact, destroying more than half of its capabilities. The courage and sacrifice of Ukraine's forces are in fact protecting the United States and its allies. In defending Ukraine, they are also defending the rest of Europe against Putin. That's a pretty good deal for the United States and our allies. It saves lives of Americans, Canadians, and our other NATO allies while protecting our values and our democracy. In addition, all of this in this audience must not forget that Russia's war in Ukraine exposed an urgent need to strengthen and invest in the North American and European defense industrial bases. To meet the demands for today's fights in Ukraine and Israel, and to prepare to deter and defend against future threats, we must increase our production of key military capabilities like artillery, ammunition, air defense systems, and other critical national security needs. Our Ukraine security aid not only helps Ukraine defend itself, but also helps us to modernize our allied defense industrial base. Once enacted, the U.S. National Security Supplemental Request will invest about $50 billion in the American defense industrial base, funding Patriot air defense systems made in Arkansas, artillery shells made in Pennsylvania, Texas, New York, and 9 other states, Abrams tanks made in Ohio. U.S. security assistance is powering American military readiness and putting hardworking Americans in good-paying jobs that make us all safer. The case for military support of Ukraine could not be stronger. Which brings me to my second point. The case for continued economic support for Ukraine is just as strong as that for the country's war-fighting ability. As Putin has failed to break Ukraine's military, he has turned his efforts to breaking its economy. In many ways, Ukraine's economy itself is the biggest prize. Think about it. Russia is attempting to sever Ukraine from global grain, steel, and energy markets. As a result, inflation globally has increased. America feels it, Canada feels it, and our NATO allies and the world feel it. I know we get the importance of security assistance, but the international community's combined economic support is equally as important to enabling Ukraine's ability to prosecute this war. Just take the U.S. funding. Our economic support covers 57,000 first responders saving lives after Russian missile attacks, 517,000 doctors, nurses, and healthcare workers addressing basic healthcare to veterans, including thousands of warrior amputees, and pays for over 650,000 teachers educating millions of Ukrainian kids, which allows families to stay at home in Ukraine. And the U.S. is not acting alone. American allies and partners like Canada are sharing the burden. For example, for both direct budget support and humanitarian assistance, partners have given roughly double what the United States' contribution has been. Our economic support also unlocks significant additional funding from the IMF. Plus, we continue to mobilize more donors to step up, and our collective leadership matters. So keep in mind that the Ukrainians are making good use of our collective assistance, investing in areas like infrastructure and energy, and focusing on a reform agenda, including anti-monopoly laws, financial disclosure requirements, energy market liberalization. And all of that will compress the time Ukraine needs to join the EU. That EU aspiration brings me to my third point: how we, as the international community, can together ignite Ukraine's future. Our goal is to help Ukraine meet its urgent needs now, and yet simultaneously engage in the long-term planning to support the vision of a sustainable, digital, clean, competitive European Ukraine, integrated into global markets. Both the short-term and the long-term effort are important to give Ukrainians the confidence to come home and start building towards that future. Both are necessary to accelerate GDP growth and job creation. So let me tell you how I see it. In my first 8 weeks, it's clear to me that there are two keys to achieving the desired end state for Ukraine's economic recovery. First, the United States and its allies must work in concert with the Ukrainian government to address the foundational issues required to attract private sector investment. So what does that mean? First and most important, restoring security. Second, reforms. Anti-corruption reform remains critical to attracting the private sector interests required for a full economic recovery and eventual EU accession. And we all have a role to play there. Third, we need to support the development of key infrastructure necessary to expand market access and increase exports. This is where we have the greatest potential for quick wins that will support opportunities with the best return on investment in terms of expanded government revenue in the near term. Fourth, equity in the law demands that Russia pay for the damage it has caused. And therefore, we must find a path to use Russian sovereign assets to facilitate Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction. Fifth, we can and we will unlock new tools like war risk insurance and maritime insurance to support companies operating in Ukraine and those that want to enter Ukraine. And finally, for Ukraine's economic success and social cohesion, it must have the capability to reintegrate two communities: its refugees and Ukraine's veterans. Addressing the foundational issues facing Ukraine is necessary, but it is not sufficient, though, to achieve our goals. We must also focus our business and private sector leadership in the relevant opportunities in Ukraine, particularly in 6 sectors: agriculture, technology, critical minerals, mining and steel, energy, the defense industry, as well as transportation and logistics. Since we're here in Halifax, let me go into a bit more detail on the potential of Ukraine's defense industry. Prior to Russia's full-scale invasion in February of 2022, Ukraine was one of the world's largest weapons exporters, always among top 20 countries in terms of arms exports. Even now, especially now, Ukraine has a lot to offer Western defense companies as a market for defense in the short run, as it works to beat back Russia's onslaught, and as an exporter in the long run, as it takes global market share from Russia. It is for this reason that the White House and President Zelensky announced yesterday that we will be holding a U.S.-Ukrainian Joint Defense Industrial Base Conference in Washington, D.C., December 6th and 7th. So let me end with an image that demonstrates the possibility. Today, Kyiv is an island of relative stability and prosperity, made possible to the large extent because of air defenses, security. Because of it, you have kids going to school, vibrant retail, even traffic jams, prosperity. That is the double helix at work. Security enables prosperity, prosperity hardens security. This is the positive feedback loop that we are here to invest in together. So again, thank you so much for inviting me and for your warm welcome. And I look forward to our discussion on the challenges and opportunities for Ukraine on the road towards recovery. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that.